Hi folks, this is Don Iovino and you're watching Western Bass TV.
I'm Gabe Boulevard and you're watching Western Bass TV.
My name is Mike Long, and this is my longtime friend and tournament partner, John Kerr. We've been fishing together for over 20 years, and together we have about 30 years of experience. So we're going to talk a little bit about tournament strategies, how we set up, kind of just what we do, going to swim baits, the successful search baits. I'm going to kind of go through a little bit of what I do with swim baits. John's not really a swim bait guy, so I'll go through swim baits, and he's kind of going to go through the drop shotting process and a lot of the tournament strategies we do. So thank everybody for coming, and I'm going to turn it over to John right now. I'll be throwing baits simultaneously as he's speaking. We're going to kind of talk between each other. So any questions, just raise your hand, and we'll get to you and answer your questions as we can. Thanks.
All right, everybody. Thank you for coming. We're going to talk, like you said, about team tournament strategies. Me and Mike have been fishing tournaments competitively together, going on 4 years now. We have 3 Angler of the Year titles in a row between us. A lot of people come up and ask me, how come you guys are so successful? What are you guys doing that everybody else isn't doing? And what I try to talk to them about is just, me and Mike talk fishing every day. I mean, every day on the phone we're talking about what we think's happening at the lakes, what we think might be happening, what happened last year at this time. And a lot of things we just bounce ideas off each other's head. Before we even get on the water, we already try to create a strategy that takes away from, doing the pre-fishing. We can eliminate a lot of the stuff we have to look for just by talking and getting a feel for other people. We have a great core of friends, a network of friends that are always out on the water that we can get ideas from. And just for example, we always talk about, if he's out on the water on, say, Salmon City, I ask him the questions, simple ones like, what's the water temperature? How high is the water level? What's the clarity? What time did the wind pick up? What time did it, which direction did it blow? And we start taking little bits and pieces of information, we call pieces of the puzzle, and the more pieces you can gather, the more pieces you can put together, the clearer the puzzle is going to be, the picture or the image is going to be. When me and Mike go into a tournament, we look at each other. He's got his strong suits as far as techniques, I have mine. Whatever the situation dictates, we let that person call the shots, we let that person run the boat. For example, right now, if we're at Salmon City, I promise you there's a sight right there. You can see him, you can catch him, and that's my strongest suit. So he would allow me to take the front of the boat, I would do my business, and he'd compliment me and back me up by throwing a big bait outside, trying to get a big bite, while I try to put fire in the boat. That's the biggest key in team tournament fishing I can tell people is, when you're fishing a tournament for points, or you're fishing a team event, the most important thing in that tournament is to get a limit. If the person fishes all 7 events in a circuit, and he gets the limit in the boat all the time, all 7 times, that person is going to be in the top 5 no matter what. It's a given. Every year me and Mike have fished, I think there's only been 1 tournament out of the 50 plus tournaments we fished, we only voted 4 fish. And the nightmare about that was we lost by 2 pounds. And the fish that we were catching were weighing between 4 and 4.5 pounds, and we lost close to 7 or 8 fish put together with a boat. So when Mike talks strategy,
I'm more of a big bait, search bait guy. I fished with John for a long time, and John throws a lot of worm, a lot of Carolina rig, a lot of stuff. You catch a lot of fish in a tournament, or when you just go out to lake fun fishing, you get a lot of reaction bites, smaller fish. I've always been a big fisherman, and I fish for big fish. You got to throw big baits, whether it be an 8-inch trout to match the hatch, or a 12-inch trout to match the hatch. I'm trying to always match the bait to the big fish are eating. So if if the big bass are eating stock trout, the trout are up to 2-3 pounds. It might seem crazy to throw a swim bait 14-15 inches, but if I want a really big fish, I'm going to go for that. Big fish baits are also jigs. I throw a lot of jigs. The problem is in tournament fishing, I learned real quick with John, I'm in my 5th year of tournament fishing, is you got to put 5 fish in the boat. And when you big fish, you don't always catch a lot of fish. It could be all day long to get one bite throwing swim bait, maybe longer than all day. So to get 5 in the boat, it's kind of hard to do. So what you want to do in a tournament is a strategy of put 5 in the boat as quickly as you can and try to get a kicker, which would be your biggest fish and your 5 fish limit. So what me and John kind of learned to fish together is how we're going to go out and find 5 fish, but at the same time I might be throwing a big bait as he's throwing maybe a smaller drop shot bait or a Cinco, and maybe his bite's wide open, I'll stop, throw a Cinco smaller bait, and kind of work out. But I'm typically in the boat, I'm the guy who will throw the bigger baits, the bigger jigs, the bigger Cincos, the big swim baits. I try that strategy for a bigger fish in our limit because if you come in with 5 fish, that's good. Most times in tournaments or just going out fishing, just to get 1 fish is tough. But you want to come in with 5 fish in a tournament, so that's good. But you're just going to be in maybe just in the money or just out of the money. So you need a kicker fish, a good kicker fish, bigger than all the other 4 you have to get yourself a little bit higher or maybe win the tournament. The ideal way is to come in with 2 kicker fish and 3 average size fish that everybody else has. You'll typically win tournaments. I've won 12 tournaments in the last 4 years by pretty much doing that. Either having really big fish, which doesn't happen too often for 5, but typically coming in with 1 big fish or 2 really big kicker fish in the tournament. So the strategy for me is always think big. If I'm in the boat fishing with John, he's going to pretty much pick apart spots where the smaller fish are. I'm going to throw outside with a bigger swim bait and let it sink. And, say this time of the season, we got a lot of fish that are spawning, a lot of fish that are post-spawning. Huddleston 8-inch bait. This is a rate of fall 5, which pretty much means when you throw this bait out in a very steady retrieve, this bait will run about 5 feet. On the Huddleston bait, you have a 0 for a topwater bait, a 5 for a 5-foot, 12 for a 12-foot, and 16 for around 16 feet. Now if I let this bait sink, it'll sink down to the bottom. And this is a great bait for tournaments. If John's in the front of the boat, got on a drop shot bite, he's maybe fishing the top of a hump, maybe we're out on a high spot or on a point. Typically, when I look for big fish, I look for big fish on points, humps, and flats with deep water access. Well, the smaller fish are going to be in the same area, so you definitely pick them off on a smaller drop shot bait, or maybe he's throwing a Carolina rig, reaper. But I'm going to be throwing outside the edges of that high spotter on that point with a bigger bait, trying to get a big bite while he's throwing the smaller baits. And what we do too, when other guys come up at tournaments, I'll stop throwing. I don't want them really to see what I'm doing. I don't want them to know I'm throwing the big bait. As soon as the other tournament guys go, I'll be fired out. But it's a strategy that's not really easy. Like I said, we want 5 fish in the boat. We like to have a couple big fish. So if there is a swim bait bite, I'll go with the swim bait. Maybe the lake we're at is, say, Lake Hodges, and it's this time of the year. We're on a worm bite, and one guy pretty much needs to be throwing a jig the whole time. And the jig's a really good big fish bait. And once again, I'll probably be the guy in the boat to be throwing a jig. I'll probably have about a 1/2 ounce jig on. Hopefully you guys can see this in the camera. I'll go a 1/2 ounce jig. I love football head jigs, where the head looks like a football sideways. It tracks through the rocks and tracks on the bottom a lot better. I go with a 1/2 ounce or 3/8, and if it's really rocky, I'll go with a 1/4 ounce. Early in the morning or dark water, I'll start off with a very dark colored jig. Like this one here is a black jig with a black Yamamoto with red glass trailer. I'll pretty much go with this color early on or dirty water. As things lighten up, I'll go to the brown jigs. I'll go to more of a natural color. Maybe I'm at a lake where early in the morning it's darker and I got water. I'll fish the black and I'll go to the brown or a green. I'll put more of a natural color trailer on, more of a watermelon seed or green pumpkin. I'll go with a lot of the browns. I try to go a little more natural, but the whole thing you want to do is try to match the hatch. Pretty much when we're tournament fishing, we're trying to match the hatch. One guy's catching the small fish, one guy's going after the big fish. The fish that we are to be after, the fish that we're catching are after probably about this big. But let me tell you, behind those fish are bigger fish that want to hit baits that are a lot bigger than that. They'll be hitting bass, you hit bass about this size, or maybe they're hitting crawdads or bluegills. So we're always trying to have one guy in the boat throwing with something a little bit bigger, and it doesn't always work, but it's a good way to be successful getting that kicker fish in the boat.
Like Mike said, the most important thing is matching the hatch. I brought this question up to a few of my friends who are talking, for example, Lake Salmon City. Anybody that's fished it in the last 3 or 4 years, I brought up the question. I said, when's the last time you guys have seen a bait ball, a shad? I tell you, I've been metering that lake looking for them. I have not seen bait in about 2 years. 3 years ago, it was so dominant, it was all over the lake. The fish were breaking on them. You get them on swimmers, you get them on ice jigs, you get them on everything out in open water. But this year, I haven't seen it. Last year I didn't see it. The fish didn't go away. So I took the question to him. I said, okay, what's their main forage all of a sudden? There's no more bait in there. There's no more shad. What are they eating? And I had people throw questions out. They said, well, they're eating bluegill. I said, no. Every fish I've caught in the last year, and whatever they popped up or whatever I've seen come out of the throat, it's been crawdads. It's been crawdads, and people don't realize Salmon City's got 2 different versions of crawdads. I talked to Larry Bartroff about it. He's got the typical creek ones that start out green, they molt into an orange, and then into a deep red. But it also has clear water crawdads. If anybody has seen those that are dark purple, almost a neon green on the sides with neon blue in them. So when you start thinking about the forage, you also got to think of what colors they are at what times of the year. And the best indication of that is if you catch a fish, I stick them in my live well, I can open that up a couple hours later and I pretty much see most of the contents that he just spit up. And crawdads have been dominant the last 2 years. And if anybody's out to Salmon City and realize how the jig bite and the worm bite is probably 100 times better than it has been in the last few years because they're not on the bait anymore. So me and Mike, we just learned everything we could about jig fishing, colors of crawdads when they molt. And if you can find the forage, you can match the forage, you're going to catch fish. Mike likes to stitch a jig. On the other hand, I like to swim a jig. I cover more water. I look for certain areas on the lake. I love hard pan bottoms. I like a lot of pea gravel, not big rocks, but I actually like boulder size, basketball size, baseball size, the hard pan bottom, and that's typically where those bass are going to be looking and searching for those crawdads. Again, I swim a jig. I like to throw it out. I like to cover water. I swim a jig just like if I was using a crankbait. It's a great search tool. Everybody thinks that jig fishing has to be slow, methodical, and it doesn't. I learned this and I'll give props to our Barry. He whooped our butt up at me a few years ago, swimming a jig. And up there, the hardest part is finding the fish. So 90% of the people fish reaction baits. He didn't fish a typical reaction bait, but he made it a reaction bait. What I do to swim a jig is I'll cast it out as far as I possibly can. I'll let it sink to the bottom. As soon as it hits bottom, I tuck my rod right under my arm, put my finger on my line, and I just slow wind it. I want to hit the bottom. Every once in a while, I want it to work like a crankbait, where it's going down and hit something that's left off. And I tell you, 80% to 90% of my bites, swimming the jig, swimming along, I won't to the bottom, all of a sudden, boom, it hits something and it bounces off and I'm dead. A typical bite on the swimming the jig is actually, I always thought, swimming a jig, I'll be swimming all of a sudden, I'm just going to pull it out of my hand and I'm going to miss it. Almost every bite I ever get swimming the jig is I throw it out, I put it in like this, I'm going like this, and I hit something, and all of a sudden I go thump, thump, 2 bites, 2 taps, my line goes flat. Every single time. When they're swimming it, they're hitting it and gliding towards you, your line goes flat. All you have to do is just wind down, fill the weight, and just cross his eyes.
And this strategy with the jig, I'm more of a methodical jig fisherman. A lot of guys have asked me, editors and people, well, if you had to pick one bait to catch a really big fish, what would you pick? I pick this jig in my hand right here. If I had to pick a color, I go with a black or a brown, but I want to throw a jig. This catches a lot of really big fish, a lot of bass. They eat crawdads throughout their whole life, eat a lot of crawdads. And the technique that John just described, the 2 techniques, stitching the jig and swimming the jig. The swimming the jig is more covering water, more of a tournament reaction bite kind of method. I like to stitch the jig. And stitching basically, It's grinding out. I like to sit the boat on the shore. First, I'll use about a 7-foot rod, Calcutta or Corrado reel with about 10, 12, or 15 pounds, typically 12 pounds. I like a half-ounce 3/8 jig. I'll spray any kind of product I get on the jig, whether it's bang, any kind of a crawdad scent, I'll put it on the bait every time. I sit the boat shallow and I'll throw that lure as far as I can, let it sink. And I want to be in an area where there's a lot of smaller rock that are baseball, softball, basketball size. I don't really care for the really big rocks unless it's one big rock on a point. That's my sweet spot, I'll fish that. But I'm going to stitch that jig through my area until I find a rock, like this rock in the middle of the tank. Once I find that rock, I'm just going to work that area quite a bit. I just want to touch that rock. I can pass the rock on that one. I want to find those targets, leave it right by the target, and I want to just bump that target as many times as I can. I want to get, if there's a bass right in that area by that rock, he's normally going to hit that jig pretty quick. So I want to do like that, is barely bump that rock. Like you can see right there, it's barely bumped, keeping my rod at about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. I'm just making a little bit of noise. Maybe that bass is about 20 feet away. I want to give that bass enough time to come in there and find that lure by just bumping on the rock. Typically in January, February, pre-spawn months when this technique works good, I just throw a straight jig, no rattles, but I'm trying to find these smaller rocks and keeping the jig, being very patient, just working it in there. And as I come through the area and I get the jig back to the boat, I do one important thing. I pause the jig. Just before you get ready to reel up, I pause. And a lot of guys that I've fished with haven't noticed that. John knows this trick. He pretty much taught it to me. Just pause before you reel, because maybe those bass take a while to find your lure and they're falling in, and just before it comes up too fast, you're getting ready to hit that jig. So always give it a pause, kind of a shake, maybe a pop, let it fall back down. You get a lot of bites just before you reel it in. But stitching the jig is very slow. Sometimes it can be a lot slower than most people want to do. You can throw it out. It might take you 10, 15, 20 minutes to get that lure back. But that's fine. Sometimes just keeping your lure out in that area will catch a fish. Then in your hand, you're not going to catch any fish or in there casting. Swimming the jig is more of a reaction bait, so you're using a jig to cover more water, and that's something I don't catch a lot of big fish on, but it's a tournament strategy, and John's got a lot of fish on it. But a jig, for me, is the #1 bait for a big bass, so kind of keep that in mind. I might ask that question later on for a run.
All right, now another technique, now we've been fishing for a long, long time. Most people know if they fish against us or know me and Mike generally, we do a lot of sight fishing. Sight fishing, bed fishing are two different things. Sight fishing, I always looking for the fish. We do it on Samson, we do it on most of the clear waters. What we do is we just run the bank. They don't have to be spawning, you just want to know where they're at. And a lot of times, typically in the spring, summer, fall, you'll get big wolf packs of bass, so we run in the banks. Typically that's what we're looking for. As soon as we find a big pack of bait or a big pack of fish, we'll back off and go over in the area. And then all it is a matter of putting the right bait at the right time, right in front of them to get them to bite. But right now, we're definitely looking for sight fish that are actually on the beds. Me and Mike have caught a lot of big fish doing it. We've won a lot of tournaments doing it. Just lately on the internet, I've been seeing little posts that just drop shotting work for bedding fish. It is my #1 technique for fishing bedding fish. Especially if you're out for tournament size fish, you're not going to get a lot of those huge ones, you know, those 10 to 15 to 16, 18, 20 pounds like he does. But typically, you can load the boat on fish up to 8 pounds on a drop shot. I don't know what it is. I think it's super stealthy. It's non-threatening. He's got my drop shot ready. I typically use a smaller leader. I go to about a 4-inch size leader. And with the drop shot, the nice thing is it keeps the bait in the nest. You can still work it, unlike a jig or a worm or something where you have to make it do something, but you're actually pulling it through the bed. The drop shot, you can drop it in there, you can shake it, that bait will pin down at the bottom. That bait sits there and floats above its head, and right in the nest. And people don't realize the easiest way for a bass to eat something is feeding up. Feeding straight ahead or feeding up. When the drop shot keeps that bait in his eyes, it's easier for a bass just to go up, suck something in that's either in front of him or above him than it is down. Because if you ever notice when you pick up a bass, they got a pretty good sized overbite. When a bass has to eat something on the bottom, they actually got to invert their body. and usually vacuum everything up, and that's silt, dirt, rocks. And if people realize in a nest, he doesn't want to do that. Because he's not only going to disturb that nest, he's going to suck up eggs, he's going to create silt and put it over its eggs. So if you notice, a lot of the times the females will go in birds and stay far enough back to suck it up without bringing everything else up. But if you got something that's up in their case, it's easier, it's non-threatening, they just go up and eat it. I'm not saying you can't get big fish on that drop shot. I've got some very big ones. Typically you're usually using lighter line. I use 5, 6 to 8 pound tests. I've got them up to 15 pounds sight fishing on drop shots. And the typical thing is you're not going to land a lot. Those big fish require big, heavy line. And you can drop shot with heavier line, you're just going to go to bigger baits. On this drop shot bait right here, we'll catch you every male in that bait, I promise you. This right here is, I believe that's the slice. They also have some made by Angler's Choice or mineral or imitations. Most of my baits I put on beds look like some sort of minnow. That's the biggest predators, your bluegills, your red ear sunfish, any other fish is a threat to that bed. I went to Havasu 2 months ago. Yeah, I tell you, I'll catch every male. I went to Havasu actually about a month ago, and everybody else I watched was throwing, your tubes, your lizards, your worms, and everything, and they were catching fish. I was able to go behind them on fish that they just swore up and down they couldn't catch. I would go behind them with that little drop shot, 5 pound test of mineral imitation, and if it took me more than 2 or 3 casts to get that fish to bite, I'd do something wrong. I caught every fish I ever saw on a bed at that lake. I never missed one, and I never had one not bite. So it's something, especially for tournament fishing, or if you're just out fun fishing, you want to catch some fish. I promise you, you put that drop shot break with a 4-inch leader and any kind of mineral imitation that fits in, you will catch every male on a day. Unless they've been hooked like 9 times and they're pretty much done.
Now, the most asked question about this rig was something brought from Japan called the Every Time Lucky rig. The Japanese guys use it a lot because fishing in Japan, a lot of the lakes are small and fish were in one area, so they had to fish a lot straight up and down and pretty much fish right on the fish. So pretty much just a dropper loop rig. A lot of people ask how you rig it. We go with about 5 pound maximum. We like to use for main line. You want a size 4 mosquito hook. I don't know if you can see here in the camera. It's a little tiny hook, a size 4 or a very small single hook. You want at least a 1/4 ounce or 3/8 drop shot weight. They're pretty cool weights. You want to make sure you get one with a swivel, because if you don't, the more you cast out, it'll twist your line. You want to run the line through your hook, holding your hook straight up. You're going to run the line down through it, tie a Palomar knot, leave yourself tag line, leave about 1.5 feet, about 18 inches of line. Run that tag line back through the eye, holding the hook up. Run the tag line back through, and what that does, when you pull on that, that'll keep your hook sitting in the correct position. And the weight's pretty simple. You run it through, and I'll use my teeth. You grab the tag line and you pull it back in. If you can see right here, it has a little cinch system. So now I've got my hook here, and in this case I have about a 6-inch leader now. One of the main questions that are asked all the time is, well, what size leader do I use? Typically, a drop shot method is for target fishing. You pretty much know you're going to be fishing a rock pile right in front of you, a ridge, or maybe a grass edge later in the season. If you're fishing a grass edge, you're going to want a longer leader. Or if you're making very long casts, you're staying off your target, you want a longer leader. If you're right up on your target, you want a shorter leader, and that's all because of the angle. So when you throw out, say, 60 or 40 feet, you're going to want a longer leader because your line angle will be down more, and the bait will only be about 6 inches off the bottom. The closer you get to the boat, the better it is on the line angle. Basically, there's 2 kind of baits that you put on a drop shot rig. There's worms, and then there's fish style baits. There's other baits you can put on like Cincos. A lot of times you put Cincos on, they'll wacky rig them where you hook it in the middle. Now you have that's a wacky rig drop shot. This is the time of the year where we do a lot of sight fishing, so we try to match the hatch, whether it's a small shad style bait, a bluegill style bait, maybe a small bass fry size bait. We try to match the hatch. And what we want to do with these baits is nose hook them. Hopefully you guys can see that on the camera there. I'm just barely putting it through the nose. I get yelled at by John all the time saying, you put too much hook in the bait. And what he's trying to tell me is I've got too much hook. And when I go to shake the bait, it doesn't shake as much. So you barely want to nose hook it. Have plenty of bait. You're going to lose some nose hook them. But now I've got that bait, nose hook. We always try to spray some kind of a scent on it to get our odor from our hands or whatever. Maybe we gassed up our boat in the morning, or we ate something, had oil that's a little negative odor. So we always try to spray some kind of scent. The easiest one to use is a bang scent. It's a aerosol kind of can, spray it on the bait. Try to do that every time you touch your bait. Try to make sure you spray it with something. Get your human scent off of it. And like John was saying before, just basically throw it to your target. Now that you have your rig, and it's just shaking the bait. You can drag the bait, just slowly drag it back, or what John's taught me to do over the years is he likes to hold his line in his hand and shake the bait. Maybe we can't see our lure so it's brought out, so let's give it a little quiver. Now for these little tiny baits, like this little bluegill bait here on the camera, or this little slice bait, these are irritation baits. If we can't see the fish, we're probably going to go with a 4-inch worm. If we can see the fish, we're gonna pick one of these bluegill baits, probably go with this slice 4-inch bait right here, and we're gonna try, we can see the fish, and we'll target fish and throw right at them, and it could be either a bedding fish, or it could be August, just some fish that are cruising the bank, and we can normally get these fish, if we can see them, we throw the slide rig in front of them, we can normally get them to bite. But it's just little small quivers, barely getting that bait moving down there, and that seems to be the trick for the drop shot. And as you throw it over time, you'll learn other tricks like different sized weights. This is more of a teardrop weight. There's round weights. There's long, slim cylinder weights. I prefer the long, slim cylinder weights almost all the time. If I'm fishing right in front of me, a target fish, I'll go to the round weight or a teardrop weight because it's less of a weight in the nets. It's not sitting there bouncing around straight up and down, because a typical cylinder weight is about 1 inch long, so I want the weight on the bottom kind of camouflaged in the dirt a little bit. But if I'm fishing in the weeds, especially if I'm fishing into rock piles, I go with the slimmer weight.
Like we were talking about, as far as bedding fish goes, the biggest irritation to a bedding fish is a minnow imitation, a bluegill imitation, a baby bass imitation. I have trout are definitely an irritation, so when people ask me if you catch big or bedding fish and big fish or swim baits, absolutely. I mean, our friend Jed caught that 2112 on a mission fish, 8 inch. The nice thing about it, if this is a really big fish and a big fish in the bed, you can throw a big swim bait in there, or a bluegill imitation like you can see right here with that back lures, that one also. With a bigger one, that male can't do it out with it. You'll beat it up. I was at Poway Wednesday before last. I was fishing a bedding fish. They ended up being 12 pounds. I caught it. I clipped in there, put it in that male, hit everything I threw it. You take it, swim it off 20 yards, throw me nuts. Kept throwing things in there. I said, you know what? I need to get something bigger. Bigger profile in there, because this male's carrying everything off. I went and put a swim bait on. I pitched out that Huddleston he has. I pitched out that deer that nest, and that male went nuts. He hit it over and over for 20 minutes straight. But he couldn't do anything with it. He didn't carry it off. He just bit it. Finally got to that female to the point where she realizes this male can handle this. She's got to do her job. She came right over the top of him. She was just about ready to eat it. He turned around and fanned her and snapped her and knocked her out of the nest. He was trying to actually protect her also. About 10 minutes later, I did it again. She came over the top of me. He didn't have a chance to actually wolf that whole thing in. I ended up getting her. She was just a little over 12. So they definitely do work. But then the next fish I caught about an hour later went 10.5 pounds. And I caught it on a small gitsit, which is actually smaller than the one I got on my rod. It was about a 3-inch gitsit. I threw it in there, the male hit it a couple times, she got fired up, she came in. And what I did in the next cast, I just had to position my bait closer to her than to him. I threw it on the outside of her, worked it up to turn around and ate it. So you catch them in all styles. Big baits, small baits, or whatnot. But you got to keep those options open. If you realize that male is not going to let her in, he's hitting it every time, bump your size up. Just get bigger. Just go bigger. Sometimes if they're real finicky, and like I said, I cooked this. I've only landed one over 15 pounds on the small drop shot, but that's only because I'm using very light line. But sometimes when you get to the point where you try everything, and there's a big fish there, why not downsize? I don't like money. Yeah, your chances of landing her are pretty much slim, but I'd rather at least have that chance. So when it comes down to the end of the time and I figure I've exhausted everything I can't catch her, I'll pick up my 5-pound test, a little minnow bait, put it in there, and a lot of times I can hook her. A lot of times I don't get her in. But I'd rather have that opportunity to at least try to land her. Let's play with her. This bluegill right here, I gotta get her props. This is made by Matt Lures. This bluegill right here, how lifelike it is going to vote a lot of huge fish in the next few years, especially in springtime and dead fishing. If he wants, if he pauses it right here, let me hold him on. If he pauses right there, hold down a little bit. There you go. Watch the way it sits on the bottom. You're messing with the catfish, dude. Okay, visually it sits, nose down. And what that looks like is a bluegill down there just sucking up all that fish's eggs, and she's not going to last. It's not going to last. She's not going to put up with it. That's going to land a lot of big fish.
In this particular bait, there's most tails on swim baits are called boot tails. If you can see here, this is a typical boot tail bait. You can see how the snake bait here has a natural tail. These fat lure bluegills, this one's a boot tail. This one's made more for swimming or bumping the bottom. Here's one that has a straight tail. This one's more of a dead stick bait, what John's talking about. It'll sit on the bottom, straight down. This is more of a dead stick bait, very natural, has pectoral fins, fully pinned out, full color, compared to the boot tail, more of a swimming bait. So this one here, you got to give a little more action and bump it along the bottom, which typically is more of a reaction bait. There's times where you're going to want to use, this bait here can even be rigged drop shot. You don't have to have the lead inside and the hook out the back. This one is a great bait. If you talk to a lot of lure makers, they'll make them for you without the lead and hook in. It's a lot cheaper and easier for them. I've emailed swim bait companies for years and so I wanted baits with no hooks inside, so I could basically drop shot the baits. It's a very, very effective drop shotting big bait. Way before the drop shot craze got in, I was down shotting big swim baits. Anything from 6 inches to 4-inch bluegill this size. Drop shot is highly effective with big swim bait. But you have to find a bait with a natural tail so it looks as natural as possible. We're going into a season right now where pretty much a lot of these fish are spawning at the moment. So any kind of bluegill bait like this, it's just going to knock it dead. You'll throw it out there. John's trying to say, let it sink to the bottom. And just kind of bounce a little bit. If the bass are in a spawning bed right now, especially, bluegill right now, their #1 enemy, or a carp. They hate the bluegill because the bluegill want to go in there and eat the bass eggs. So the male will do everything he can to try to guard the nest with his bluegill. So by slowly swimming it through an area, maybe the water's chocolate, dirty, you can't see anything, a bluegill bait is a very good choice right now. The clearer the water is, the more natural you want to go. In this case with the Matt Lures, this is about as natural as you're going to get for a bluegill for a paint job. You have the Cascade bluegills, they're almost spot on bluegill for shape, the color's pretty good. And then you get into the Jerry Rago bluegill, great swimming bluegill, lots of colors. These are great baits. The more color in the bait, the dirtier the water, it's a great combination. If the water's really stained, you still want to try to match that. You go with a smaller wood bait. Go with a bass pattern, like you can see I have a lot of old optimums here in the bass pattern, or bluegill, but you want to do more of a harder bait. This is a hard classic monster jack right here in a 6-inch version. This is a great bait if the water's real stained to run it up shallow or if there's some bass spawning. They'll hear this bait. They'll hear this bait swimming and bumping the bottom. This is a great search bait this time of the year. A lot of bass will hold their territory, so if another small male comes into the area, he's going to defend that area, or if a bluegill comes in, they'll defend that. Nobody really has a hard bluegill right now, so we kind of have to settle for the softer bluegills, but these are all baits that you need to have in your boat this time of the year. There's some times where you can throw, I've had guys say, do I have to throw a bluegill or a bass pattern in March, April, May? No, you don't. You can throw a trout pattern sometimes. This right here is my original optimum swim bait that I got. This bait is over 12 years old. This is my original swim bait that I started catching swim bait fish on. This bait here, I caught fish year round. This particular bait probably has about 10 fish over 10 pounds on it. and probably 20 fish over 5 pounds throughout the year. So they didn't care in August that I was throwing a trout pattern, they still ate it pretty good. So sometimes you want to definitely have a bass pattern lure or a bluegill pattern lure, but if you can't get it, don't get discouraged, you know. Keep using what you have. And another thing too, people always ask me, I keep an accessory box. Basically it's hooks and swivels and snap rings. I'll have some swim bait glue. Right here, this is soft bait glue. This stuff is awesome. Maybe I get a tear in my swim bait. After catching a couple fish, I can put a couple drops of that swim bait glue on, and within a few seconds, I can have that bait repaired on the water. If I have a stinger hook, I can glue the stinger hook. A stinger hook being, you can see on this Optima bait here, I have the regular hook that's inside the single hook, and on the very end I have a treble hook here. Well, I can't take this hook off because I glued it on. And what I did was make a leader from the eyelet all the way to the rear on a small size 4 treble hook. I set it in there and I put one spot of glue on the top of the tail. Now that, I can throw that and throw that and throw that. That hook won't come out until a bass grabs it and he hooks himself, then it'll rip out. Then I'll need to glue again to glue it back in place. So the glue comes in handy, and trout butter or any kind of a pasty scent. I use this for 2 reasons. This is called hot sauce right here. I don't know if you can see it, it's a real pasty. The hotter it gets, the more liquefied it gets. This is a great bait because you take the lid off, you can hold your bait without getting it all over your hand. You kind of rub it on the bait. You get it on both sides. You can kind of rub it this way, and you get a nice slime coat look to it. You get 2 things out of it. You get the smell factor, the scent, but more than anything, what I want on these big baits is when I'm throwing these big baits, I want to have some kind of a lube product on it, even if it's Vaseline. I put it on a long time ago. Because when the bass comes up to hit this thing, most of the time, he'll grab it like this. And when I go to set the hook, if this bait doesn't move correctly, if he's grabbed down on this bait, and I swing and he just spits it out, I've lost it. But if I put a little lube on it, when I go to swing, it slides in his mouth better because his teeth are real aggressive and real tight. So when he bites down and I swing when I have that lube on there, it allows that bait to move in his mouth more freely so I get a better hook set. Before using hot sauce, I didn't use anything, and I missed a lot of fish where I felt him pump the bait. I went to swing, and I'd miss a fish. And I'd see teeth marks all over the bait, and I was frustrated. My friend Mike Dad said, hey, I'm up in Paris. I put this stuff on all my big 10, 12-inch swim bait. I don't lose too many fish, so I tried it, I put it on. Worked great for me. And it's an easy applicator. You just take the lid off, rub it on there, it's ready to go. You really don't have to touch anything. So a lot of times, if you can't do that, the option is to actually get a large sandwich bag, like a freezer bag. Put some sand in that sandwich bag, drop your bait in, you can kind of squeeze that sandwich bag. Right here you can have a liquid kind of bait. You can drop that lure in while it's still tied on, kind of squish it up with a stuff in the sandwich bag and pull it right out. Once again, your hands are still clean, you're ready to go. Because another thing too, you want to keep your hands as dry and ready to set the hook. A lot of times I've had too much slime by touching the bait, moving the sand on the bait, next you go to grab my reel and set the hook, and I've got my reel too slippery. So you want to try to keep the sand and everything away from your hands as much as possible.
Like Mike was talking about, don't be afraid to throw those trout patterns in the middle of summer. People always ask me, they're like, well, there's not stopping trout now what do I do? Well, you still throw it. I mean, to be honest, I'd rather throw a trout pattern in the off season of trout stocking than during the stock. The only reason why is I don't have thousands of trout out there to compete against. We got thousands of live ones swimming around. I'm trying to represent one with a plastic bait or a hard bait. This past summertime, they didn't care what a trout looked like. They still know what it looks like. Now you're not competing against the numbers of a real thing. So if you took that thing, say in August, and you came up to a point that has wind blowing on it, about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening, I promise you, if you slam a trout across that wind blowing point, that bass didn't forget what it looked like. He's an opportunistic feeder. He just found out, and he just figured out, I got a solo trout in the middle of summer swimming by, what an easy deal. You get more bites, to be honest with you, I do. He gets them all the time. I get more bites in the summer and fall on trout pattern swim baits than I do after the show stock and trout. Also, I was talking about the bed fish. One key I learned about 4 or 5 years ago. When I started drop shotting, I started putting baits inside the nest. I realized I wanted eyeballs on it. For some reason, you put eyes on your bait. The fish have a reason to key in on it. It looks like a bait fish. I don't know what it is. I put a bait in there, shake it a while, don't get any answers, so I put something with eyeballs on it, I get hit. I'll even take a black marker, because a lot of my worms don't have eyes with them. I'll just put 2 dots. I give them a target zone to hit on. And eyeballs are a key factor during bed bait.
A lot of people ask, okay, I get asked about swim baits all the time, and I get lucky to write a lot of articles. I'm getting ready to put together a lot of footage for a video that I'll probably put out at the end of this year, probably closer to 2006. So we're going to have a lot of info in the video. But I get asked all the time on the water, or I get phone calls with the editors. I always want to know, what swim bait do I get? You know, if a guy has to go out and buy one swim bait, what do I buy? That's a pretty tough question, because there's so many swim baits out there right now. For a soft plastic swim bait right now, the top of the food chain runs about 25, 30 bucks. There's a Huddleston swim bait. There's Rago baits in many different patterns, hard patterns, soft baits, generic trout. He has all hard bodies. There's giant baits that are 12 inch. He has a top water and his teaching model called the Tool, which I just thrown that out. He has bass pattern and 8, 9 inch. Pretty much what you want to do is whatever you can afford. If you can afford to go for the Huddleston bait, get some Rago rats and some of the harder baits, you want to go for it. Right now, if I have to take a bait, one swim bait with me, and I think John knows it, it's going to be this plastic bait right here. Then the 8-inch model, and I'm going to go with a 5. And like I explained before, these models have a 0, 5, 12, and 16. What I like about this bait is, I can throw this bait out there and let it slowly sink. I've got it rigged with 2 hooks. The 5 doesn't come pre-rigged with any hooks. You have to rig the hooks on there yourself. See these bass like it quite a bit. They'll come up and if you dead stick it, they'll pop it quite a bit. This bait has to be rigged. What I'll do is I'll use some. I used to think the way to go is bigger treble hooks. On these baits, I go as small as I can. And you can see here I have a bottom eyelet here, the top eyelet where I hook up the bottom eyelet. I put a slip ring on. I put a size 4 hook on, treble hook. And then I have my rear seam, which is about a size 6. And what I have buried in this base is a small tube from an ink pen. I found that works really good for me to hold my hook in place. And if you've ever taken apart the ink pens that holds the ink, that little tiny cylinder, that hard plastic, I like that. I take a piece about a 1/2 inch, maybe a little bit shorter. I cut a piece off, I stick inside the bait, a little bit of swim bait glue, glue that in place. Now I can take my hook and set it inside that tube, and I've got a way to hold it in place. And if you can see here on the pelvic pins, I'm trying to hide that hook as much as possible. Here is a 12 model right here that has a top hook built into the bait. Here I have the bottom stinger hook rigged on the bait. I try to hide it with the pelvic pins as good as I can. And I also try to spray paint the hooks flat white, try to match the bottom so if they're looking at it at a different angle, they don't see that treble hook on there. If you can't afford a bait like this, a soft plastic, Jerry's baits, I have great paint jobs on them, and you can get them for a lot cheaper price. You can get the optimal bait still, they're about 10 bucks, and they're basically a bottom bumping bait. I'm looking for baits that I can bump the bottom on, and I want to have a bait that I can cruise the surface. But right now, if I have to choose one bait, I go with the 5. And I just want to slowly work this bait back. When I feel that I'm by a target, maybe I fish this area in the morning, I got on a jig bite down at the rock. This one's foul, I'm going to throw it back up. I actually got it all back. What I want to do is get this bait to slowly swim through my target area. And most swim baits are reaction baits, and they're meant to fish very fast. They have paddle tails on them, and they're meant to fish very, very fast. This bait is a slow bait. You want to work the area very, very slowly, a lot like the stitching a jig pattern. Very, very slow. It's very tough on the hooks. You might not be able to get away with the 2 hooks on. You might have to go to a double or a single hook. Rigging is tough depending on the area you're trying to fish it. It is a bunch of streams, it's a rock. But the whole thing is just to fish it very slow. Let it slowly sink down, almost dead sticking, and just give it the slowest reel. And you'll feel bottom sometimes, just give it a little bit of a reel, just kind of dead stick. And these bass can't stand it. The longer this swimbait stays in their area, it looks so real, they just can't stand it. They get on it. These bass in here haven't ate for a while, so I'm pretty surprised they haven't popped it yet. The other night they were hitting the head on it like crazy, but this is a great swimbait right now. It's one of the best going. Like I said, the other baits I use are Rago baits. I use a lot of Castaic baits. I use a lot of Osprey surface cruising baits. Right now in the San Diego Lake, it gets a lot of pressure, so you don't really get too many fish on topwater baits. Surface cruising baits, that's the time you probably get them is early in the morning, late in the evening, or maybe when a storm comes through. This is the time of the year where you want to be working the deeper water that not too many people have run a swimbait through, so you want to fish a lot slower. Any questions on swimbaits? I'll be here after the seminar for about a couple hours, so I'll answer any questions. Yes, sir.
What brand is that one that you like?
This is a Huddleston swimbait. He's one of the original owners of Castaic Baits. The guy went and started his own swimbait company, and he calls himself Huddleston Swimbaits. His idea is try to make the most natural looking swimbaits possible. That was kind of the same concept when they were at Castaic, to try to make the baits look as natural as possible, like the bluegill here, or like some of their old trout swim baits. So his goal is to make it as natural as possible by the look and the swimming action. He's done a pretty good job, I think, with this bait so far. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to give a rod away right now. We're going to get ready to wrap it up. And I've got a 7-foot United rod made by Graphite USA and Hastings Rod. And I ask people questions all the time, and I've caught a lot of big fish, but if anybody can tell me the weight of my largest fish, I'll give that rod away to them. I'll have John walk forward, I can bring it here.
What was it? The biggest bass.
The largest bass that I've caught, what was the weight?
What did you say?
20 pounds, 12 ounce, or 20.75. That was the, at the time, the 8th largest caught, and I let it go, catch and release. It got caught again at 21 pounds. It is the 4th largest ever caught. So a pretty lucky fish. He got on the top 25 list twice. So I think John's got another United rod to give away. He'll be asking a question, and I want to thank everybody for coming.
This one might be a little harder. Rounded to the nearest pound, what was the winning weight I had won the U.S. Open on 2 years ago? Give it up first. 18 pounds wrong. Close. It's a 3-day competition.
38 pounds.
Nope.
24.
Nope. What'd you say? Nope. 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 27.
I want to thank Mark Hall, Mike Battistoni, and Mike Lum for getting us down here. I think next year we're going to be able to do a few more seminars. We try to come in and do it between our tournaments and everything else we have going on. I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and hope you guys have a good time at the show. Like I said, any questions, you'll find me somewhere within the name of Dan or by the name of Pre-2011.
Yeah. If you guys want to take a break, I'm going to be doing a seminar. Somebody else will be able to by those.